This is the self-directed help seeking and skill growth project in the Agile Research Studios special interest group in the DTR class. I am Shankar Dutt Salwan presenting my end of quarter research talk today. So just a brief overview of what we'll be covering in my presentation today is I'll be going over the problem statement of the challenge I'm addressing in my project, some design arguments that I have come up with over this quarter, the prototypes I've developed, and the user tests and current iterations of user tests I'm performing, and alignment of future steps I have in the project. So firstly, the problem statement out here is to understand this. We're going over the help-seeking process. So the help-seeking process requires users to firstly understand what their help-seeking needs and challenges are. Once they understand this, users begin to identify resources or helpers that could possibly help them in overcoming these challenges. To do this, they require identification of what expertise and skills or experiences they require. And secondly, they require knowledge of resources and experts in the community that could possibly help them. And finally, once they have this large chunk of identification done, they enlist helpers and or find the resources and begin to problem solve to overcome these challenges. In this process, our problem statement highlights two really important facets of help seeking is a difficulty noticed in novice learners in independent research or project communities. And for the scope of this project, we're practically focusing in the DTR community. Novice users really find it difficult to identify what challenges they're facing, and since they're finding it difficult to identify these challenges and often think of tasks that they're performing and not challenges for help seeking, they find it difficult to think about what expertise they require because oftentimes the thinking is rooted in a task and not in a challenge. So there's not a direct mapping of what expertise they need. Based on the problems I've identified so far, this is a rough conceptual approach we have towards solving this problem is to begin in supporting independent users and communities be independent in the process of help seeking. We need them to be able to understand and identify their help seeking needs very specifically, and to kind of identify and explain what this word specific means is. We should be able to prompt and guide student reflection in understanding what their challenges are and why they're facing these challenges, understanding these challenges in terms of a conceptual context of what is like a learning gap they face. And at the same time, instead of thinking about tasks and challenges, getting into the context of their project of what in their project is leading to this challenge. So, for example, a user thinking about prototyping would be able to align the context of prototyping a certain feature in their project that they're finding difficult, and mapping that to a conceptual expertise of a certain field of prototype development. And that's the third conceptual approach of kind of being able to align these challenges to broader research goals. So challenges that we've kind of noticed in developing these solutions or kind of working towards developing this conceptual approach is, firstly, there are no systems that are available to actually support user reflection to identify specific challenges and think about it in terms of help seeking. A lot of sort of systems that might exist might be for recommending experts, but this comes with the assumption that users and students know exactly what they need help in and they've already identified their required expertise. Along with this, experts have this practice of using in-context responses to, let's say, a student's challenges or tasks that they're blocked on to help them diagnose what their problems are. So these practices are really difficult to embody in a system because they take in a lot of in-context analysis of what's being said. So, for example, a mentor would kind of be talking to the student, and the student says, "I'm finding it difficult to conduct my studies." And mentor would ask, "What about the study?" So they're taking in these responses given by the students to kind of diagnose and guide their reflection. And consequently, the problems we're seeing in students is they're finding it really difficult to think about the context of their project. And when they're thinking about tasks, it's very difficult for them to separate a task in their project to like a conceptual working in their research or their project. So like a higher level mechanism. And at the same time, if users are thinking about high level mechanisms, they're not able to get in specific, very specific and exact with what about that mechanism is challenging for them, as they have large learning gaps in these mechanisms. As a result of a lot of these challenges faced by students, they often heavily rely on mentors and faculty for help, which can be consequentially quite draining because students often end up relying heavily on these mentors, and often their help requests are delayed and they're not able to make progress independently. So, based on my conceptual approach and the challenges seen so far, the contributions in my research so far is we've been able to model these expert practices and back them up from arguments seen in literature about how we could prompt students to reflect in specific aspects of what their challenges are, why they face these challenges, and using these kind of reflections to guide students in thinking about the context of their project and aligning it to broader research goals and progress they're conducting. So in this process, we've come up with scaffolding prompts, a set of prompts that are kind of sequential. And we've also conducted user studies with these prompts to test how these prompts actually perform with students using them and not just base them in theory. So before we tested these prompts, we conducted a lot of need finding to firstly understand what obstacles are for students to be more specific and actually identify their challenges, learning gaps, and context and expertise for projects. And in the process, we see that novice users or novice students, so undergraduate students, lack a lot of reflective models in identifying challenges or thinking about help seeking needs. Often they think about obstacles as tasks that they're unable to perform in their project. Secondly, novice users kind of heavily rely on mentors and faculty because of multiple reasons, and a few being, as mentioned before, this conceptual ambiguity in understanding a lot of learning needs that they have. So, finding it difficult to get specific with mechanisms that they're trying to work with. A large context dependency, they feel that they require kind of helpers to know what their project is about and kind of what they're dealing with in the project. So high dependency on task definition. Additionally, novice users also lack a lot of awareness about expertise in the community and often feel shy in asking for help because they worry about wasting a helper's time. Also, when in need finding, we observe that when a lot of these novice users are prompted by helpers, whether they be their mentors or other helpers in the community with the required skill sets, they're able to help these novice users diagnose their problem. So, in phase when people are help seeking, they're actually sometimes going into a lot of time spent in diagnosing their problem. Secondly, we did need finding and understanding what do we mean by a specific help request or what does it mean to have a good help request. It's a good help request is able to kind of highlight what challenges users face, in what context their project are they facing these challenges, what exact expertise or experiences are they looking for, so helpers can kind of align whether they fit this criteria or not, and what type of help do they need. Do they need feedback, brainstorming, a lot of other kind of help request types. So based on this, we prototyped this set of prompts that is sequential in nature, where the response to each prior prompt kind of builds up to the response to come in the current prompt. And we're able to kind of tackle this is based on the beginning need finding, how we can help users think about their challenges and why they feel blocked, and what about their blocker is kind of obstacle is significant to them. And secondly, kind of guide them to think about this blocker in terms of overall progress in the research and map it to their research canvas. So in the process, users are actually able to break down a lot of their needs and think specifically with their overall reasoning. And after collecting a lot of these responses, we request users to kind of develop a help request in a concise manner, such that they're not over contextualizing or being over contextualizing about their needs. And the conceptual vagueness they had that kind of restricted them from structuring help requests before is now overcome with this abundant reflection. So they have a lot of things to think about and talk about while going off the bat. So based on this kind of like a technical approach or system design we have is we were able to model these expert strategies into a single interface. And as mentioned before, it's a sequential set of prompts. So every response in the prompt is kind of developing onto the next prompt to come, and the reflection builds off each prior reflection, in turn to help users actually break down and go into a bottom up and top down understanding of what their needs are. And the template or example help request that we came up in our final prototype iteration helps users structure their help requests by understanding what are like these reflection components I have and how do I fit them in. So we conducted a pilot study with the first set of prompts shown with 4 participants. We tested this set of prompts and the prototype we've developed with the baseline condition of just having users state their help-seeking need by themselves without any support and identify helpers. And we measured improvements by this rubric that we kind of built out, and this rubric for specificity that covered in the need finding, as I'd shown before, what do we mean by having a good help request? And along with this, we sent these help requests randomized to mentors to rank for which one is more specific in their regards and what covers the students' kind of help-seeking needs. And additionally, we had post-user test subject interviews where we had a conversation with them about how they felt in using the scaffolds and what they liked and didn't like. Based on the pilot, this is the prompt used for the pilot study. So based on the pilot study, we gathered significant results. So we were able to see that 3 out of 4 users that participated in the study were able to show rubric improvements, and 2 out of these 3 improved users actually had a perfect score on their rubric. So they got all the requirements of understanding what a good help request is. Additionally, 3 out of 4 users after using the set of prompts changed which helpers they wanted to use, and this was due to they identified a different set of expertise after thinking about the help request. And all users, when in the subject test, in the post user subject interview, stated that they were better able to understand the help seeking needs and frame their blockers. And additionally, we also, from the mentor assessment, saw that mentor assessment for all 4 user test showed that the help request identified with their prompts was much better than the help request without the prompts being coming in. Although we saw some significant results, we did see some shortcomings in the from the user test and the prompts. Sometimes the prompts was not able to actually guide students to think about the context of their project, as the prompts could be a little vague for them to understand and not specifically make them think just about their context in a single context of their project in a single regard. A lot of the rubric measures we had measured the outcome a lot, but we weren't able to measure the process of how students are actually able to think about their help seeking needs. So, based on these kind of rubric improvements, we came about Study 2.0. So, we improved our rubrics to actually measure the process and added questionnaires for users for self report and measuring their process and how they compare their performances with and without the prompts. And we also had a more systemized process of mentor assessment. Along with this, we had a broader set of users that we used for this user test. So based on the shortcomings we saw, we kind of changed our prompts a bit by adding a prompt that went specifically into the context of a project, and we added a set of examples. And in these examples, we highlighted what specific sections of the help request look like, so that users are actually able to structure it with more ease rather than having to take all the reflection elements that might not occur to them very naturally, but just kind of construct the help request. So based on the work I've done so far this quarter, I was able to conduct Study 2.0, but the evaluation and analysis of the results is yet to be done. So this is a part of my future steps. So from initial analysis that I've seen a lot of significant improvement by using the prompts, and I'm yet to see how it met the outcomes we require. But the user tests we had so far had a big risk of kind of priming the users by having them initially reflect about the help-seeking needs in the beginning and then making them move on to using the prompt. So we want to test the baseline and the prompt separately and not in a single setting. Additionally, we're able to see how these prompts are working, and we're able to see how we're getting more specific with needs. Since we're getting more specific with needs, we want to find a way to collect all the data of specific needs in the community so that we're able to identify expertise that actually are relevant to the community. So developing an interface for the prompts and having pipelines to collect this data. Alongside We also want to take this a step further in the scope of our project to move on to the second part of how we can help users identify experts and think about their help seeking needs across the community and not just restrain themselves. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed.